Trump wanted the world's spotlight. He got it along with two angry neighbors, a trade war, and a continent on edge. Just the tournament, sprawling across 16 host cities and stretching over 39 days, lands in the middle of a period of extraordinary friction between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. When their leaders gathered in Washington, D.C. last December for the tournament draw and posed beaming for a selfie with FIFA President Gianni Infantine, the carefully choreographed optics concealed months of simmering resentment. Hosting a month-long festival of football together will be an entirely different and far more demanding game. President Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact that he views the United States as the dominant force on the continent. That unapologetic assertion of supremacy ensures that the very real tensions dividing the three neighbors on trade, immigration, drug trafficking, and now the geopolitics of China could boil back to the surface at any moment. Yet there is another possibility. If the three hosts get it right, the World Cup could forge closer bonds and rewrite a relationship that has lately been defined by grievance. Mexico and Canada, the top two trading partners of the United States, have not forgotten that they were among the first nations targeted with punishing tariffs after Trump returned to office. Canada, additionally stung by Trump's repeated talk of making the country a 51st state, retaliated with countermeasures of its own. Canadian provinces stripped U.S. alcohol from store shelves, and citizens significantly curbed travel southward, a move that irritated the United States in return. The wounds remain fresh. The problems the two neighbors have with Washington have also damaged their own relationship, suggests Carlo Dati, Director of International Policy at the University of Calgary. In the lead-up to Trump's second term, Canadian and U.S. officials argued that Mexico was serving as a backdoor into North America for Chinese investment, effectively accusing Canada of throwing Mexico under the bus. It was downright disrespectful, Dade says. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has consequently found himself trying to mend fences with Mexico, even as he works to diversify Canadian trade away from the United States. No World Cup has ever been hosted across three separate countries. The 2026 edition, spanning an entire continent, involves a dizzying array of authorities, with fans moving constantly between the three nations to follow matches. The intensified immigration enforcement efforts of the United States could create logistical chaos and inflame already frayed nerves. American security concerns, heightened by the ongoing war with Iran, may add fresh layers of frustration, where even innocuous incidents risk spiraling unexpectedly. Lindsay Sarah Krasnoff, an author and clinical assistant professor of global sport at New York University, warns against assuming that co-hosting naturally breeds goodwill. Co-hosting these global sporting events is not necessarily a recipe for a lovey-dovey relationship between the co-hosts, she says. While the 2023 Women's World Cup, hosted jointly by Australia and New Zealand, proved a net positive, the 2002 men's tournament shared by Japan and South Korea was, in her words, a mixed bag for two nations carrying a long and uneven history. It didn't negatively impact the bilateral relationship, but it's kind of viewed historically as kind of a draw, she adds. FIFA itself has voiced grand hopes, declaring the tournament a moment when three countries and an entire continent collectively say, "We are united as one to welcome the world and deliver the biggest, best and most inclusive FIFA World Cup ever." Whether that rhetoric can survive contact with reality remains to be seen. Each leader may see the World Cup as a stage not only for neighborly harmony but for proving a point to domestic critics. That is unmistakably true of Mexico, where a degree of doom and gloom has surrounded co-hosting preparations. Persistent questions have dogged the readiness of the capital's main airport, its saturated public transport system, and the revamped Azteca Stadium. The appearance of cartel members on the streets in a short-lived but terrifying display of violence months ago lingers in memory. Now the main teachers' union has called a nationwide strike over pensions and conditions, complete with massive protests threatening to close the main thoroughfares to the matches. Their slogan is blunt: without a solution, there will be no kickoff. Yet through every challenge, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has remained resolutely upbeat. It's time to witness the best football in the world, and to share with everyone who we are not only a country of immense cultural heritage, but of an empowered people, she declared last year. Mexican football journalist Rafael Puente argues that papering over the cracks would be a misuse of the landmark North American Free Trade Agreement, the USMCA, a process that has left uncertainty hanging over a trading partnership in place since 1994. Mexico has launched formal talks with the U.S., Canada has not. Canada is seeking closer trade ties with China, while Mexico has raised tariffs on the Asian giant, a divergence driven by the Trump administration's focus on China as a primary consideration. Yet the World Cup offers a rare diplomatic opening, as glimpsed when Trump, Carney, and Sheinbaum smiled together at the December draw. Anytime you get leaders together, it's generally a good thing. Date observes. Trump, who routinely boasts of his nation being the hottest in the world, views the World Cup as an opportunity for the United States to dominate the global spotlight. His desire to shape the proceedings, whether by attending events or firing off Truth Social posts, might breed resentment among his neighbors and cause longer-term damage. But he is also heavily invested in the tournament's success and may take unusual care to avoid diplomatic incidents that could ruin the party. As the old cliché goes, for all the grand speeches and carefully staged photo opportunities, the fundamental question hanging over this tournament is deceptively simple. Can three neighbors who have spent months antagonizing one another really unite to host a seamless global event? The cracks are not hidden. They are visible to anyone paying attention. Trade wars, immigration crackdowns, and pointed diplomatic slights have created an atmosphere more suited to a summit of rivals than a celebration of the world's game. The selfie in Washington was a moment of theater. The moving between host cities spread across an entire continent. For the United States, still on high alert because of the ongoing war with Iran, this movement will be viewed through the prism of security. Stricter immigration checks, heightened surveillance, and the ever-present possibility of an incident, whether real or perceived, could transform routine travel into an ordeal. For supporters from nations with historically difficult relationships with Washington, the experience may feel less like a festival and more like running a gauntlet. Canada and Mexico are acutely aware that the spotlight will expose their own vulnerabilities too. The simmering strike by Mexico's teachers' union, with its threat to blockade the roads leading to matches, is a reminder that global events do not pause domestic grievances. They amplify them. Canada, meanwhile, must navigate the uncomfortable position of being America's northern neighbor at a moment when the relationship remains raw from the 51st state taunts and tariff battles. Prime Minister Mark Carney's delicate dance trying to repair ties with Mexico while simultaneously courting China illustrates the tangled web of interests that the World Cup will bring into sharp relief. Trump's own role in the tournament will be watched obsessively. A president who thrives on attention and disruption may find the temptation to dominate the narrative irresistible. Each appearance, each late-night social media post, carries the potential to either soothe tensions or inflame them further. His administration understands that a chaotic or incident-marred World Cup would be a national embarrassment. The question is whether that understanding will translate into the kind of restraint and behind-the-scenes cooperation that successful co-hosting demands. What makes this tournament genuinely unprecedented is not simply the three-nation format, but the volatile context in which it unfolds. Unlike the relatively smooth Australia-New Zealand partnership, or even the awkward but functional Japan-South Korea arrangement, the 2026 hosts are navigating genuine, active, and public disputes. The review of the USMCA trade pact is unresolved. The strategic divergence over China is widening. The personal chemistry between the leaders remains untested beyond staged pleasantries. Tensions overnight. The most optimistic scenario sees the World Cup becoming a circuit breaker, a shared project that reminds the three nations of their deep interdependence and common interests. In this vision, the tournament fosters the kind of people-to-people connections and institutional cooperation that outlast political cycles. The darkest scenario is that it becomes a friction point, where every logistical hiccup and security incident is magnified by the pre-existing atmosphere of distrust. The truth, as always, will likely fall somewhere in between, shaped by decisions made in the weeks ahead. What is certain is that this World Cup will be about far more than football. It will be a referendum on whether North America's fractured relationships can be patched together under the global gaze, or whether the cracks that have appeared over the past year have grown too wide for even the beautiful game to bridge. Three hosts in the stands, and wondering whether they can finally find a way to play on the same team. And so the stage is set for a World Cup. Unlike nations will find themselves not merely as hosts, but as characters in a drama far larger than sport. The trade disputes, the diplomatic wounds, and the personal dynamics between their leaders will not vanish with the opening ceremony. They will linger in every handshake, every border crossing, every presidential appearance. The has already begun, and its ending remains anyone's guess. For now, the world watches and waits.